Fidel Castro, first Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba and 15th President of Cuba. He died aged 90 of natural causes on the 25th of November 2016. 2016. Yeah, this guy lived a full life. But due to the fact that Cuba was on the doorstep of the United States, his life was certainly one of intrigue, mainly due to the fact that people tried to assassinate Castro many times. Yes, being the head of the Communist Party in Cuba means that you also have to survive hundreds of assassination attempts. And no, I'm not kidding when I say hundreds, because the man reportedly survived 634 attempts on his life and somehow lived to the ripe old age of 90. So we're going to go into detail of what the hell happened and how he was still with us for so long. It's a pretty impressive story. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and I would certainly go into detail of all 634 attempts on his life, but we'd be here all bloody week if I did that, so we're going to go on a whistle-stop tour of some of the more interesting things that happened during his life. Fidel Castro, Cuban revolutionary and politician, rose to power and became the Prime Minister of Cuba from 1959 to 1976, and he was president from 1976 to 2008. Cubist nationalist and Marxist-Leninist leader, he ultimately transformed the country into a one-party communist state, nationalising much of the business and industry in the country, and implemented socialist reforms you would expect to see in any good communist state. So, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the United States following World War II was involved in the secret assassination attempts of many foreign leaders, and, Castro was one of the people on that list. Yes, this secret practice of international political assassinations of foreign leaders was something that was denied for many years, with the CIA director at the time saying that no such activity or operations were being undertaken, assisted, or suggested in any way by their personnel. The extent of what was actually happening was uncovered a few years later, and it was shown that many communications, whilst not outrightly telling people to assassinate Castro, were very thinly veiled attempts or euphemisms to basically try and get sly wording across to tell someone to assassinate Castro. 634 attempts. That's pretty good going. And you're probably wondering how we managed to come to this figure. How do we know how many times that he tried to be assassinated? Well, we've got a few measures for that. Well, this comes from Fabian Escalante, a retired chief of Cuba's counterintelligence who had been tasked with protecting Castro. He estimated the number of assassination schemes or actual attempts by the CIA and Cuban exiles to be 634. This is broken down as follows. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 38 attempts. John F. Kennedy, 42 attempts. Lyndon B. Johnson, 72 attempts. Richard Nixon, 184 attempts. Jimmy Carter, 64 attempts. Ronald Reagan, 197 attempts. George W. Bush, 16, and Bill Clinton, 21. According to CIA Director Richard Helms, Kennedy administration officials wanted to, quote, get rid of Castro, due to the fact that his regime was looking bad on John F. Kennedy. The first attempt on his life was apparently during the Bay of Pigs operation, which is now more commonly known as the failed military landings on the southwestern coast of Cuba in 1961, which was secretly financed by the United States. It was reported around the same time that 5 different CIA teams all went separately to try and take down Castro, each of them being foiled, with the last one in particular being caught with a sniper rifle on a spot ready to take down Castro. Well, thankfully for him, he's got some pretty good guys around him to prevent this from happening. So close, but no dice. Whilst there's been many attempts undertaken by the CIA directly, they also engaged local contacts and Cuban crime lords to recruit people to undertake the assassination of Castro on the CIA's behalf. This even included drafting in the help of the Mafia. Successors of Al Capone's Chicago Mafia outfit were indirectly contacted by the CIA about the possibility of Fidel Castro's assassination. Those successors were these two guys, and what's important to know about them is that both of them were on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list at the time. So the CIA must have been pretty desperate to hire the Mafia of all people to take down Castro. So when you weigh the two up, clearly those Cuban communists were a much bigger threat at the time, which really speaks volumes. This was discovered through declassified CIA documents years later, which stated that there were suggestions of using poison pills and putting them in Castro's food and drink. The more I read into this, the more wild this story gets, not gonna lie. Attempts were made on several occasions to poison his food, but none came to fruition. One attempt was even thwarted when the Bay of Pigs invasion began, resulting in Castro not visiting a restaurant that night, which had already been arranged to have poison pills ready for use in his food. These same pills were also considered to be put into his cigars and laced with poison. But this plan was never acted upon, which is surprising given the fact that every other photo of this guy I see online, he has a cigar in his mouth. So yeah, if they focused more so on the lacing his cigars with poison side of things rather than poisoning his food, the CIA might have got the results they were looking for. So yeah, at the time they didn't act upon it. But that didn't mean they did it later. Yes, after more assassination attempts, the CIA ran Operation Mongoose, which unearthed many innovative methods of termination, including poisoning his cigars, poisoning the lining of his scuba diving suit, and even placing booby-trapped conchas on the seafloor on the many attempts they tried to blow him up. Even on one occasion where they tried to blow him up when he visited the Ernest Hemingway Museum in Cuba. Yes, and this is a pretty big theme when you look at all of the instances of these assassination attempts. Many of them were to do with explosives, so much so that they even tried to put explosives in his cigar. The problem was that he quit smoking in 1958, meaning that idea went to pot. They even went further than this, as the former lover of Castro, Marita Lorenz, was instructed by the CIA to try and kill him by smuggling a jar of cold cream with poison pills. Castro, however, was hot on this and avoided death by cold cream. Yeah, this Castro guy was a slippery figure. He'd managed to escape many attempts, and because of this, the CIA decided to change tact. And on some occasions they tried to do some things which weren't necessarily meant to kill him, but were meant to hamper him and his reputation. This included the attempt of removing his infamous beard by the use of thallium salts, or to lace his radio studio with LSD, causing him to provide a disorientated broadcast and damage his public image. Any port in a storm, I guess. The CIA was so desperate, in fact, that they even tabled plans to airdrop leaflets in Cuba to try and galvanise the public to take down Castro. The plan never went into action, but I would be very curious what would have happened if they ever did that. However, Cuban exiles were largely instructed from the 70s onwards. Trained by the CIA, this went on for a period of 30 years, with the last documented attempt being carried out in the year 2000 by Cuban exiles. This was thwarted when 200 pounds of explosives were discovered in Panama City, on track for being used to kill Castro. Many of these documents were declassified by Donald Trump of all people in October 2017, in which this revealed much of the plans that the CIA undertook to recruit the mafia. Whilst these were reportedly done under hesitation due to the push against organised crime, clearly their need to remove Castro was greater than that of removing the mafia. Trump was asked by reporters following the release of these documents what his thoughts were on the assassination attempts of political figures, to which his response was simply, "You think our country's so innocent? So I'll let you be the judge of that." So yeah, that's a pretty insane story, and just to round it all off, this is a guy that survived over 600 assassination attempts, survived to the ripe old age of 90, and then decided, I've had enough of this, and went out with a bang. But just not the bang that the CIA were expecting. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can finish this video any better than a quote that Castro said himself, in which he said, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I would win the gold medal." If you guys liked that video, here's another one just like it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.